is the one that kind of brings interest to me. Eight Keys to Wholeness is her main book, but she's also written Total Wisdom and some other. I think Total Wisdom was translated into 5 languages, so it's a fantastic read, very, very interesting read. Amber Stevens wrote Food, Feelings, and Freedom, and then to Emotional Eating. Very okay topic. Marilyn Saltzman wrote the book Your Love is Blasting in My Heart, A Grandmother's Journey. And so that's a fantastic book. And I am the author of The Caregiver's Handbook, a self-help love story. And so all of these books can be accessed to the radio station through me. You can call 303-255-0567 and get access to that book.
Hey, Paul,
yeah.
You're going out. You're going in and out. I'm not hearing you all the way.
Okay.
There you go.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. You are watching. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. You are watching KUHS The Stream on Melody Drive. This is the Weekend Boost, and I am the host, Paul Lane. Those of you who watch the show regularly know that we like to start out with some past guests, and we talk about their books. This is one of the books that Donna Denome has written. Actually, this book, As You Feel, So You Heal. Fantastic read, folks. Amber Stevens wrote the book Food, Feelings, and Freedom and Emotional Eating. And this book, I'm going to tell you, as a man, I've really enjoyed this book. It's very simple, easy read. You can turn to any page and you can get a lot of information that's useful and stuff you can really chew on, no pun intended. Marilyn Saltzman wrote the book Your Love is Blasting in My Heart, a Grandmother's Journey. This is a wonderful story about Marilyn Saltzman's experience with her granddaughter. And just a very easy, fun read. And so, please take a look at that. Guys, if there's any books that you ever see on the show and you'd like to get your hands on them, you can reach us at the show at KUHS Denver. You can reach us at 303-255-0567. I am the author of The Caregiver's Handbook, a self-help love story. And again, if you'd like to get an autographed copy, call the show and we'll be glad to help you out with that. And with that, we are going to introduce our guest. Yvonne, help me with your last name.
Marzuk.
Marzuk, okay, that was easy enough. So Elaine has written, Yvonne has written the book, The Prophetess. And I've been able to go through the book and not read the whole book because it's very, very, there's a lot of detail and a lot of information in the book. But this is really a great title for a book. And you've written this book as a Jewish young lady, and she has been called to a responsibility to become a prophetess. And tell us a little bit about how you came up with this topic to write this book, Yvonne.
Yeah, so this is a book. Thank you, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here, and it's great to get to know your community, your audience. I'm really happy to be here today, so thank you. The book is called The Prophetess, and it took me 20 years to write this book. So I started it when I was in college as part of an independent study. I was in the writing seminars program at the Johns Hopkins University, and I was really I had like a lot of questions about God and our relationship to God, and how we can have a meaningful and fulfilling relationship with God. And in the Jewish tradition, we have this truth, this sort of tradition that prophecy ended at the beginning of the Second Temple period, so about like more than 2,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so we have this concept that prophecy ended, and the way that it was kind of communicated to me was like this idea that almost made me feel like, can we still have a relationship with God? What does that mean? And I really wanted to understand, like, what kind of relationship can we have with God, and what does Judaism say about that? And so I began to imagine this secret community of Jewish prophets, and this girl Rachel, who was called to join them, and to do a lot of research and exploration about like what is that? What does prophecy mean for us today, or what does it mean to have a meaningful relationship with God? Can we learn things from that relationship? Can we grow from that? And that was a really important exploration for me that I was doing both personally and as I was writing this book.
Mm. Now, in the beginning, the main character, Rachel, talks about the word God, and her grandfather had so much reverence for the word that he was so cautious not to take the Lord's name in vain that he wouldn't even put the O in the word God. And how did he pronounce that?
Well, so traditionally, so Orthodox Jews particularly, but traditionally in Jewish thought, God is known by many different names, but not really by the name God.
Yes.
So we have lots of different names for God, and that refer to different aspects of the one God. And it would be so in my tradition we often refer to God as Hashem, which just means the name. And that is our kind of go-to first way of referring to God is by calling God Hashem, the name. And that way we're definitely not taking any name in vain. We're just referring to God as the name. But when I was in school, when I was in Hebrew school when I was a kid, and I wasn't raised in the Orthodox Jewish tradition, but even then, I was aware of people who would put the dash in, who would not spell out God's name, and I actually found that to be really fascinating. Even then, early in my own spiritual kind of journey, the idea that you would hold a name in that kind of reverence, that you wouldn't say it, that you would treat it with that kind of care, really spoke to me.
Yeah, I love that when I was reading about that, because it just really elevated it to a level of reverence that most people don't consider, and I really appreciated that. As before the show, I was mentioning that I had a neighbor he had been in a concentration camp, and he was so humble and such a nice man, and he invited us to his home one night, and we were so honored to go there and to visit him and his wife, and I felt so ignorant. I felt so, I don't even know the word. I was so humbled just being there and just knowing that this man had been through so much, and yet he maintained his faith, and it was just such a beautiful thing for me to see.
Yeah.
So you were raised not Orthodox?
Yes, that's correct. I'm Jewish. I was raised, as a Jew. But some Jews are raised in a kind of religious background, and some not. And there's quite a wide range of the way that people are raised, within Jewish tradition. Mm-hmm. And it so happens that I was raised without a lot of traditional Jewish background. I was raised in a family that was what we call secular, I spent my chunks of my childhood asking questions and wanting to know more about what it meant that we were Jewish, wanting to really, I felt a connection to a tradition that I didn't really have that much access to. Mm. And as I grew up and was able to ask more questions, I was able to find people who could answer those questions. It took a long time to find those people. And one of the reasons I wrote The Prophetess is because when I was in high school and in college, I was really looking for spiritual wisdom, and I was reading all kinds of books. I loved the Celestine Prophecy and Siddhartha, and I read Conversations with God. Those kinds of books were really speaking to me, and there wasn't a Jewish book like that. It really bothered me that I couldn't find within my own tradition that kind of wisdom journey type of story. And so what I wanted to do with The Prophetess was to tell this wisdom journey story, a story where you could, another book that I sort of resonated so much with when I was younger was The Alchemist. These stories where you it's a novel and you're following along with the characters and the characters, but you can also pick up little bits of wisdom along the way. So that at the end you've connected with the characters and had a meaningful experience, but you've also learned something, hopefully about yourself and about a tradition that that you can connect with, and even for people who aren't Jewish, I felt and certainly for people who are Jewish, that there should be those kinds of books where you could learn that from within this tradition. And that was part of the reason that I really wanted to tell this story, so that I could create that for others who might not have had since I hadn't really fully had access to it when I was young.
Mm-hmm. So when you, I guess going back to Rachel, the character, it really starts out, she's going to her grandfather's funeral, and she has this awakening shortly thereafter. And I'm curious, did that have some parallels to your own life?
Yeah, it did. I mean, it's interesting. My grandfather was not like Rachel's grandfather, but I did begin a kind of journey of self-exploration when my grandfather died when I was 17. Of just really wanting to understand just life in a different kind of way, and prompted for me a whole series of questions, like, about life and death, and about, what our purpose is in the world, who are we, what are we doing here, what does it mean to be a soul, those kinds of questions that really burned within me until I was able to get some answers for them.
Man, I tell you, I think so many people have those questions unanswered in their own spirituality or in their own being, and I think it's really a topic worth exploring, because I mean, we always ask, why am I here? What is my purpose? Why was I born? And I think that as we go through life, it's a living, I mean, an experience after experience after experience that eventually develops into, who we eventually want to become. But I think that there's so much more to it.
Yeah, and I think, that kind of, I don't know if you call it mystical or spiritual wisdom, I feel that it's kind of lacking in modern culture in some way. Like, we're looking for it, but we don't really have it. Like, I feel like there's a lot of seeking it, but it can be hard to find.
Yes.
And hard to really get in an authentic way. And I think that it's really, really worth searching for. And in my own tradition, I spent a long time searching for it, because it's not something that is always, the first thing that gets taught. And so I did a little bit of learning of Kabbalah, the roots of Jewish mysticism, and a little bit of really trying to delve into those kinds of questions within a Jewish framework to really understand what this tradition can say about that wisdom. And I found, it's funny, I think that many Jews aren't even fully aware of the depth of wisdom that there is in our tradition for this. There's so many really important and meaningful answers that come from our tradition, and I really wanted to make that available through this book.
Mm-hmm. A lot of mystics and a lot of very wise men and women have predicted that, and still say that we are in a great awakening at this time. And it seems, as I read your book, that this really seems to bring so much more to light. I think that, exploring Jewish mysticism for me is really exciting, because it's ancient, and and I think there's so much more to it. I taught adult Sunday school for many years at a church I used to attend, and I always had a Hebrew translation Bible handy, so that I could reference words and phrases and understand traditions, and there were so many things that were just to explore there. It was fascinating for me.
Yeah.
And you seem like you've really presented this in a way that people want to become more involved or want to become more knowledgeable about this. And I think it's very, I think it seems to be well laid out, so that it does leave the reader intrigued and wanting more.
Yeah, that's the goal. And I think, one of the things that I think about this is, first of all, I thought to myself, as I'm writing this story, it's not heavy on the Jewish mysticism. It's not didactic or anything. It doesn't kind of hit you over the head. But my idea was that there are concepts in the story that could be a kind of arrow, like a key or an arrow that point people in a direction. If it speaks to them, if it speaks to you, then there's a lot more that you can learn about it. And there's a bibliography at the end of the book for those kinds of, if you would like to learn more, where you could find more information. But also, my thought about this is that the theme of the book is really grow into all your gifts. So in the beginning of the story, Rachel, a 17-year-old girl, is looking back at an old prayer book that her grandfather, who has just passed away, had given her. And he had written into the margin of the book, "For Rachel, may she grow into all her gifts." Mm-hmm. And there's a kind of thread that runs through the story of what does it mean for Rachel to grow into all her gifts. And this is, of course, a story of a girl who's really called for something very special. She's called for this very important role in a secret community of Jewish prophets that she's, discovering as she's going. And it's quite a challenging thing for her to grow into those gifts. Sometimes not easy. Sometimes something that she really has to struggle with. But I think for all of us, there are gifts. We all have gifts. We all have gifts that we're growing into. And what are those gifts? And I think, if you're still alive and you're still, no matter what you've already done, you have gifts that you're still growing into. And so for every person that reads the book, I hope that what they'll take away from it is, she has gifts, but what are my gifts? What's my purpose? What am I still here to do? How can I grow into those gifts? And I hope that message really resonates. I don't expect people to become prophets after they read this book, but I hope that they'll maybe think for a minute, like, what else and what's next for me and how can I grow into that?
Absolutely. Now, did you get pushback from when you wrote your book from within the Jewish community? Was there resistance? I mean, just saying that there's not recognized prophets or prophetesses in today. I'm guessing that you probably got a little bit of maybe some pushback.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, one thing that I have heard and that I've tried to do, for example, in teacher's guides for the book and that kind of thing, is to be able to answer the question of how can I clarify for you which parts of this book are fiction and which parts are actually Jewish tradition. And really, everything is actually Jewish tradition or, authentic, except for the very specific parts related to prophecy, which are just a little bit of an extension or stretch of what we already think about what our relationship with God can be. Because even today we have an idea within Jewish tradition that's called Ruach HaKodesh, the idea of being able to intuit what Hashem wants us to do or be, or how, what our purpose is, to kind of have a kind of holy intuition. And so the prophets do that, and then a little bit more. So I've tried to just, and we have a Jewish tradition for Jewish meditation, and there's meditation in the book. But that's authentic Judaism. The lessons about the soul and our purpose in life and about God are authentic lessons. So most of it is really very faithful to the tradition. I just, took a little bit of artistic license with, the idea of the community of prophets doing what they do. And that was just, I think that in some ways you can actually reveal more truths with fiction than with fact. And so I think that in this way, by playing around with that a little bit, other things can be revealed. So that's, but I haven't really gotten that much pushback. What's interesting, in terms of pushback is this is a girl who's, living a regular kind of secular life at the beginning of the story. She's doing things like eating pork and having a crush on the non-Jewish guy down the street. Those are the things that I've gotten more pushback from certain parts of the Jewish community. But I think if the story is authentic within the, for the characters themselves, and that's just where she is at the beginning. So.
Yeah, I think that knowing a little bit about biblical prophecy and just having read quite a bit of the Bible, it was really exciting to me to see a prophetess. I mean, even if it's in fiction, I just thought, wow, that's profound, because it's very non-traditional, and it just doesn't seem like something that you would expect. So it's really wow, that's a cool surprise.
Good, I'm glad. I think that it's, when I sort of think about these prophets, is they're like, mystical Jewish superheroes. They have, purposes in life that they're fulfilling, and they have a little bit of divine help knowing what those are, and they work together. And I think that, that's one way of thinking about it is, all of us, what is our superhero powers that we're finding and growing into, and the prophets have theirs in this story.
Very cool. Very cool. Hey folks, if you're just joining us, you're watching KUHS The Stream on Melody Drive. This is the Weekend Boost, and I am Paul Lane. Today we have guest and author Yvonne Marzouk, and she has written the book The Prophet. And we're just talking a little bit about prophets in modern society, and I just think that it's fantastic to consider or think that there are still prophets out there, and and even if it is fiction, I guess for me, I keep my hopes up that there is more prophecy coming, and there are more prophets out there, and so the topic is really of interest to me. You talk about Jewish mysticism. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think that I'm not the only person to say this, but I think that mysticism is something that has been, I think, missing to some extent in our culture altogether. And maybe in Jewish tradition there was concern that mysticism might be misused or misunderstood, and I think that that's still something that we have to be careful about. I think there are ways that mysticism can be misused, and that we have to be cautious about not getting confused about who we are and where we belong. Actually, in Jewish tradition, there's an idea that you shouldn't learn Jewish mysticism until you're 40. And I started learning it when I was 36. But I will say that I really understood when I started, and it's not like I haven't learned a lot of primary texts, but the things that I've learned, I will say that I really understood that it was useful to be kind of grounded in life before starting to kind of dabble in, more ethereal or spiritual concepts. That there's a way that we want to be, fully in the world and in life before we do that. And there are Jewish concepts that there's danger associated with that, and that we have to use it carefully. And there's things that we can learn, but we have to just be very cautious about not misusing or misunderstanding what we're learning. One teacher that I learned with actually says a prayer for the class beforehand, that all of what we learn will be used for good, and that we'll use it to make ourselves better and the world better. And I think that's such a beautiful practice, because it does require those kinds of good intentions. Mm-hmm. And all that said, I do feel like certain parts of Jewish mysticism, certain aspects of it are kind of needed right now for a hungry world. These kinds of concepts that, we have these concepts about what it means to be a soul and how the soul is always connected to God, how we, are kind of receiving certain kind of wisdom, if we can tap into it, the willingness to consider that that we have a purpose in life and that we're here for some holy reason, and to be really awake to looking for what that is, and the willingness to see what we would call hashgacha pratit, the hand of God in life, how events are happening, how coincidences happen, or synchronicities, or other kinds of things, tuning into that and kind of seeing how that what those messages are for us. And I think that kind of tapping into our own intuitive knowing, I do see it kind of showing up in many different places right now. And I think it's an important thing that we need to get better at, kind of being with our own silence, listening to our higher wisdom, and that ultimately that wisdom is coming from a higher place. Mm-hmm. So I think that those kinds of things are really important, and can be really helpful, if they're being used in a holy, healthy kind of way. Certainly.
I mean, if even for just grounding of oneself, I think that there's got to be a lot of multiple benefits. Now, when you talk about meditation, is meditation something that's comparable to what we perceive as meditation in today's world, or is it really just a silent sitting and resting, or how would you describe that, meditation? Because I think that's very important to any kind of spirituality.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's not always like not popularly known that that there's a Jewish tradition for meditation, and it comes from a different kind of place or direction, I think, than some other kinds of meditation being practiced today. So I think it's really, I think it's interesting to explore. In Jewish tradition, you know, there are a series of kind of different sorts of meditation practices. There's a book called Jewish Meditation, written by Rabbi R.A. Kaplan. He also does has a book called, he's unfortunately no longer with us, but he also has a book, I think, that's called Jewish Meditation in the Bible, and that really explores that in depth. And I think, to me, the difference, so far as I understand it, is that like sitting meditation or sort of, I don't know, meditation that might come from a Buddhist tradition or from, a mindfulness tradition, is about, kind of being quiet and getting, kind of being mindful, getting to a sort of quiet place. Whereas from what I've learned, Jewish meditation is often more active than that. It's I mean, there's a tradition for Jewish walking meditation, like sort of walking with God. It doesn't have to, but I mean, there is also sitting. There's also, there's a kind of tradition for certain kinds of mantras. But I think that it's not necessarily just about being quiet, but also about being connected to higher levels.
Yes.
Higher levels of our own soul, and to the divine, and drawing from that experience wisdom, like wisdom about ourselves and about the world, and ultimately, I think, sometimes about being a better person, like about, what is there to improve here. Judaism has a very strong tradition for what we call tshuva, like this idea of repentance would be the English translation. And I actually explored a little bit in the book this idea that, like, Jewish tradition assumes that everyone's going to make mistakes, but that the point of the mistakes is to grow and learn from them. And so when you make a mistake or you do something wrong, it didn't work out the way you thought, or that you went the wrong way, then we do this kind of process of tshuva to see what we can learn from that and then grow from that. And this idea of, like, how can I be better? How can I grow into, like, the next level of me is very strong within Jewish tradition. And I think that one aspect of Jewish meditation can also be that, how can I grow here?
I love the word tradition. I think of the Fiddler on the Roof. Tradition, and I think about, when I was teaching Sunday school and I would do my studies, and they would talk about how they would wash their hands and water couldn't go down their elbows and they had to put their fingers down. There was so many ancient traditions that they approved. I just was fascinated with just picking up all this information, and I can imagine what it must be like growing up with so steeped in tradition. And was that something that you grew up with, or was that kind of non-existent until the later part in your life?
Yeah, it was really not very existent until the later part of my life. So it was something, but I wanted it. I was like I was hungry for it.
Yes.
From a young age. And I think, it's really true that Judaism is just, I think that the rules, like the whole set of rules, kind of get a bad rap. I mean, sometimes people, refer to Judaism in such a way that, like, it's like the religion of rules, like as if rules are a bad thing. And I think that really, from inside, it's like it's a series of structures, rituals that connect a community, that bring a community together, like, so that connect, like, horizontally a community, and vertically a person with the divine. And I think that if you're in a constant process of, engaging with those various different kinds of obligations and commitments, and for Orthodox Jews, it can be really all encompassing. I mean, there are holidays, there's what you eat, there's when you pray and frequent prayers. Yes. There's saying a blessing before eating food. It's really it's immersive. And then there's, of course, like the entire world of keeping the Sabbath and Shabbat, like our Saturday. Yeah. And I feel like I should say, like, this is pre-recorded. I'm not speaking on Saturday, just to make it clear to everyone that I'm not doing that. Yeah. But I think that it's a very immersive experience, and that's can lived inside of can be very holy.
Mm-hmm. But I really appreciate your reverence for the Sabbath and the Shabbat. I just thought it was so cool that you said, I'm sorry, I can't record today. And I just appreciated that so much, because it just shows me how much you value your faith. And, to me, that is just, it's just confirmation that what you're walking the walk. And so I just wanted to point that out, just how I noticed that.
Thank you.
Rachel, she's got a lot of dimensions. I mean, like you said, she's living a non-traditional life, and she's dating non-Jewish boys, and she's going through some real internal challenges. And what is it that triggers this change in her? Was there a significant emotional event, or did she just all of a sudden awaken one day and say, hey, it's time?
Right. Well, when you read the book, you'll see that the way that this begins is that Rachel, because her grandfather was an Orthodox Jew, found herself periodically in her life at the Orthodox synagogue. But she herself kind of felt alienated and separated from that world. And so after losing her grandfather, she begins this conversation with, this man, my grandfather, was like my link in the chain that connects me back to Abraham. Mm-hmm. And now he's gone. So, like, what is my link? Like, what, can you create your own relationship with God? Mm-hmm. And through the story, she is able to eventually create that relationship in a very dramatic and meaningful way for her. Mm-hmm. But what happens is that when she's there, the family decides to still go back to this Orthodox synagogue for the high holidays, for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Mm-hmm. And there in the synagogue is a very special and holy man whose name is Yonatan. And he's one of the prophets. He's part of the secret community of Jewish prophets that's calling Rachel. He's been sent there to Baltimore to teach Rachel. But they have to, kind of find each other, and she has to trust him. Mm-hmm. And so Yonatan is actually one of my favorite characters in the story. He's recovering from his own personal trauma. It's kind of alluded to in the prologue. And we get to learn more about him and about the struggle that he's going through, what it took for him to come and teach Rachel, is its own story that evolves throughout the novel. But so there's a moment where Rachel in synagogue is like thinking about what her grandfather had written into the prayer book and prays, like, God, help me grow into my gifts. Mm-hmm. And then there this man is there to help her grow into her gifts, and they meet in a really dramatic way and begin learning together, and that's how Rachel begins her journey. And at the same time, she's also having the beginning of visions that don't make sense to her in the beginning, and that she begins to develop. She begins to develop her own spiritual pathway, and begins to be called with these visions that are eventually going to help her understand who she is and what her life is meant to be.
Wow. Now, does she the character, I'm sure she faces some challenges, because as one being a prophet in today, and being a prophetess, I mean, they have to present some unique challenges for a character, or anybody, I think, in the Jewish faith. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's so I think one of the trickiest parts for me was trying to figure out how because in Jewish tradition only the very very highest prophets get visions while they're awake. And so Rachel's not in that category. And so that's like a Moses kind of category.
Yeah.
And so what she's getting are visions that kind of knock her out, like that like would occur for someone else who saw them, like a fainting spell.
Wow.
And so that's a really big problem, especially when she's trying to keep this a secret and she's got friends and school and all these things. How does she get better and better at being able to prevent them from creating these kinds of huge distractions? And in the beginning they're very exhausting for her, so how is she going to live a regular life? And it does create some crises for her that that she really has to learn how to live with, and also to strengthen her own self so that she can be better and better at managing these events that are really having a significant effect on her life. And at the same time, she's a teenage girl in her senior year of high school, and so there are other kinds of challenges. One of the things so this book, I should just say, is especially is great for young adults who are 12 and up, but is also really loved by adults. So it's great for everybody. And we just usually say, I mean, if you have a really avid reader who's under 12 who would be excited by this book, they could probably read it, but there are a few social issues there between the characters that we think parents should be aware of before they give it to a kid under 12. And so but so she's dealing with that. She's dealing with the guy she has a crush on, and she's dealing with schoolwork and all those kinds of things. She's dealing with friends and the challenges that they're facing, and she even is dealing with a particular friend who's having a significant crisis in his life related to drug abuse. So one of the things that the teens who really liked the book told us was that they really loved the characters because they could feel the tension, like the real life part of the story was also really resonant and important to them. It wasn't just like a mystical story for them. They were teens really love the characters and the relationships. They feel really connected to that. So this can also be a book like the teen. So one of the things that we found that really works is like mothers and daughters reading the book together, or it can be a great gift for a teen who's like spiritually seeking, and anyone else who finds this interesting and engaging.
And non-Jewish people, this is a very interesting read for you too. This is not specifically for just one group of people. I think it's a very, very broad manuscript that has a lot of detail and depth in it.
Yeah, and I'll say, I mean, so I'm speaking from focus groups that we did with people who loved the book, and we did have people from other religions who were part of those focus groups who loved it, and they said, it helped them to understand Jewish tradition better, it helped them to feel more connected, to different kinds of people, and also helped them, that they were inspired on their own, but, we can always be inspired by each other's wisdom too. So.
You bet. As metal sharpens metal, what is it? As metal sharpens metal, the mind of one man sharpens the mind of another. And so, yeah, it's very interesting.
Or woman.
Just joining us. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't need to do a quick station identification.
Sure.
If you're just joining us, you're watching KUHS The Stream on Melody Drive. This is the Weekend Boost, and I am Paul Lane. We are talking to Yvonne Marzouk, who wrote Prophetess. And we were just talking about Jewish tradition, and what an interesting read it is, because most of us don't have a knowledge of Jewish religion, much less mysticism, and I think it's really good for us to have a broad knowledge, and especially when I was 16 years old, I went on a search. I was on a journey. I didn't know what I was looking for. I was looking for meaning, purpose, origin. I don't know. But I just started going to different houses of faith, and I believe that there's someone out there who was on a search like that, and I think this would be a really good book to pick up and give them some kind of a reference to the broad view of things, and so I think it's just a great read for that.
Yeah, that's definitely my intention.
Now, Rachel has a condition called fibromyalgia.
Oh, that's me.
And that's you, yes.
Yes. Not Rachel, that's me.
Okay. I'm sorry, forgive me. I was looking through your media pack, and it mentioned that, the fibromyalgia. And so you have some really unique challenges.
Yeah, so thanks for asking about that. I don't get to talk about it so often. So one of the things that in the story, Rachel deals with pain. One of the things that she's dealing with in the story is experiences of pain that are happening at different parts in the story and that are related to the prophecy. And that are not obviously not by choice, and not necessarily even part of what God is trying to communicate to her, but just the nature of the kind of journey that she's on leads to that. And it's not a permanent state for her. She is freed from that. So it's really just some specific circumstances between the prophets, and she's freed from that by the end. And but sometimes people have asked me why this character experienced pain, and I sort of relate to it with my own experience, in the process of writing the story. I'm sure that some of my own experience made it in there. I think that as a person who has struggled with fibromyalgia, and also, thank God, had a lot of opportunity to deal with it through a lot of different kinds of treatments that have been helpful for me. It's been, to kind of continue to deal with that, and then learn how to, kind of keep going, and sometimes not keep going. I think the story took a long time to write, through ups and downs and other kinds of experiences in my life. And I think that, knowing how it feels to be in pain and not knowing why made its way into this story, because that's something that I've struggled with for myself. And for me, one of the things that's helped me, like contextually, is to just think of, I actually heard this radio interview that was explaining how people could, I'm sorry, I'm kind of getting too deep into things. What I'm just trying to say is that what matters, what I came to understand, or what came to be important to me, is that what matters is not whether I'm in pain, but whether I can do what I'm committed to doing. And that if I can do what I'm committed to doing, then the pain is not that important. And when the pain gets to a point where I can't do what I'm committed to doing, then I need to do something about that. Whether it's, if it's, some certain kind of treatment, or like a new supplement, or, some kind of shift, or, maybe that day I just need to rest, or something like that. And then, but not to expect that my life is going to be pain-free, which for a long time I was aiming for, and then came to realize that that's just not going to how it's going to be for me. And so, I wanted to share about that. I haven't talked that much publicly about the fibromyalgia, but I wanted to share it because I think that it's important for people who've struggled with different kinds of chronic conditions or chronic pain, that one shouldn't, that even though it can slow us down, it doesn't have to stop us in what we're really committed to.
Absolutely. Another thing that I liked about your press kit, it talks about this book is actually a great tool for authors. Someone who's exploring technique, who's exploring different styles, writing styles, someone who's exploring, just thinking about writing a book. What kind of, or I guess feedback, or I don't know the word I'm looking for, what kind of advice would you give for someone who's considering, someone's sitting here watching the show and thinking, man, I think I should write a book. Maybe I will. Well, I don't know. I've been thinking about this 20 years. What would you tell that person?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, the most important thing is, if you truly believe this is something you should do, it doesn't have to be a book, but if you truly believe this is the calling for you, this is part of what you're meant to do here, and you really want to do it, don't give up. Just keep going. Don't stop. And when you stop, because I mean, I stopped many times, but when you stop, like go back and keep working on it. Don't stop. It's like, don't, you can pause, but don't give up. And know that if this is really what you're meant to do, it might take a really long time, but it'll be worth it in the end. And for me, in terms of writing, I mean, I wrote this story. The draft that was published was the 8th draft. The first draft was 700 pages long, and basically very little of it made it into the final draft. I kept writing this story over and over again until I got it right. And it required, I mean, in the end, a lot of it got written during a maternity leave, or at least got a really good start on it then. But in the end, what made a difference for me was I had a writing coach, and I committed to her that I would write 4 hours every single week, and I reported back to her about whether I did my 4 hours. I had to, there were parts of the story that I just kept resisting writing, and I ended up having to write them all out of order. And that actually helped kind of break the thing that wasn't working for me in terms of trying to write it chronologically, which wasn't working. I think there's so many different kinds of techniques that can be tried, but the fundamental thing is, you got to sit in the chair and do it. And if the first draft is bad, like that's just how it's supposed to be. You just have to keep going.
Absolutely. I remember when I was writing my book, I started out as a blog, and I just kept adding on to it, and all of a sudden, someone said, you've done so much research. Why don't you write a book? And I mean, it was like, me? I could not conceive of myself writing a book, and yet, there's my book. It's been completed, and I have to say that you've done a lot of the hard work that comes after the book is written. Because getting to the point where you have a press kit is grueling. I mean, it's so difficult finding someone to do your media and someone to do your marketing and someone to. I mean, it's just really difficult, and you've done a superb job of getting all that behind you.
Thank you. I owe a lot of credit to my publisher, Bancroft Press. He's been the publisher of Bancroft Press. His name is Bruce Bortz, and he's been a real champion for this story. He believes in it from the beginning when he read it, and has really. Along with the people who are working with him at the publishing company, has really stood for its success and has been really behind it all the way in terms of all the different ways. The press kit, because of his efforts, the book is in 42 library systems around the country, and if it's not yet in your library system, request it. And so I really do feel grateful for the support that I've gotten in terms of getting the word out about this story. Mm-hmm. And thank you very much for the opportunity to share it with your audience.
Oh, I'm so glad to. I really am, Yvonne. I just, I think that, especially young authors, I think it's so exciting. I had a gentleman a couple of weeks back, Todd Fonestock, and we talked about how he had written his book, and he just conditioned himself to write 2,000 words a day.
Wow.
And so for him, that was his benchmark, and he stuck with it, and now he's written 19 books, and he's I don't think he's 45 years old yet.
Wow.
And so
it's interesting because everybody has their own sort of life curve, and so like if a person can write 2,000 words a day, that's amazing. But a person shouldn't think that if they can't manage that much, that they won't ever get this done. Because 4 hours a week doesn't seem like that much, but over 3 years, man, you can get stuff done. So if it happens, if it's spread out, as long as it's consistent, you can get it to happen. And that's really cool that you started with a blog. That's that you got a lot of stuff written without even knowing you were writing a book. That's like quite a head start.
Oh, it was, and I was able to really draw upon it. I didn't use all of my blogs, but I, my wife was terminally ill at the time. She was in hospice, and for me, that was my therapy, and that was my release and my escape. And it was just a whole host of just relief for me, and so, I think that you have to really just make the decision that this is what I'm going to do. Hey, if it takes 10 years, that's okay, because in the end, it's going to be completed. And, whether it took a day or a week or a month, it doesn't matter.
Right.
What are some of the unique challenges that you faced as you were writing this book?
That's an open question. I'm thinking about multiple ways to answer it. So, the unique challenge that I faced was that I found I would get really inspired to write this book, and so I would sit down and 50 pages would be written in a series of a few weeks. And then life would have this way of kind of taking over. I've done other things. I ran an organization called Campaign Sharim, which teaches about what Jewish tradition says about protecting the environment for 10 years. And I'll just make a plug that an ebook came out of that that's called Uplifting People and Planet, which is 18 essential Jewish lessons on Torah and the environment. And that's a great book. And my organization is now part of another organization called Grow Torah, which is the same kind of Jewish environmental efforts through a traditional Jewish lens. So all that said, that organization was one that I created, and when I created it, I was no longer able to write this book. I was running an organization. So and I was just saying, so those kinds of challenges definitely intervened. I'm not sure that everyone has an organization intervene in their writing a book, but that was one of my unique challenges. I think one thing about me is that I'm not, I love to write, but I also love to be with people. And so it's not easy for me to close myself into a room for days and days on end. I love to connect with other people, and so finding a balance between the writing and the wanting to be in my life was something that I had to deal with. And I think one thing that I'll say is that during the process of writing this book, I did have the experience that I needed to grow into being the kind of person who could tell this story and have certain life experiences. And one thing I'll say is my mother passed away in 2013, and it was just a really, really hard experience for me. We were very close. And the process of being with her through her illness and when she died was really hard for me. And some parts of that, of kind of what it, what it's like to experience someone dying, what it's like to be there with someone when that happens, and how that can both be just tragic and horrifying, but also just sort of to be with someone in their journey as they're in that coming to the end of their life is also so precious at the same time that it's so painful. And I tried to, so I feel like there was wisdom that I learned through that process that I didn't really necessarily want to learn, but that was important, and that also made its way into this story in the way that the characters deal with, and I would say ultimately both kind of struggle through and also sort of come to the point where they are able to triumph in the sense that they're able to move on in beautiful and holy ways after having experienced the death of someone they loved.
Yes. I have to say that ushering someone out of this world into the next is probably the highest honor I've had in my lifetime. I was there when my wife passed away. I was there when my mother passed away, my brother passed away. And I can't even describe it. It's beyond surreal. It's the highest honor, I think, for someone to bestow upon another. And I don't even know how I can justify saying that, because there's no way to quantify or to even explain how you feel when you're at that moment. But it's beautiful. I think it's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Sorry about the loss of your mother. That's a terrible loss. You're a young woman. Um, when Rachel finds herself in the shoes of a prophetess, how is she received? I've been curious about that. Is she? I mean, it's got to be a difficult path.
It is. I mean, and I think so. Well, there's two different things. Like, so internally, like with the prophets, right? So she's dealing with the prophets know more than Rachel for a lot of the book about who she is and what her role is, and they're dealing with both, you know, really trying to help her while also kind of keeping some important secrets from her that don't get revealed until the end of the story.
Cool.
And so this tension that they're dealing with of both kind of helping her grow while at the same time kind of protecting her from parts of her destiny until she's ready to understand them, is a part of the tension of the story that as Rachel grows into her gifts, you know, the prophets kind of like, you know, trying to decide and understand when she's ready to know things. And I think, you know, there's also a real challenge for Rachel's family, who are not, you know, Orthodox Jews. They're not traditional in all of their observance, and they're you know, they see their, you know, sister and daughter kind of you know, going on this path that's really different from their path, and also that's true for Rachel's friends. And so you know, it's my view. I mean, having gone through a journey of you know, making a choice to live differently from the way I grew up, then we shouldn't ever have to lose anyone in that process. I feel like if you are, you know, changing your life in such a way that the people you love don't recognize you anymore, or you can't maintain that relationship, then you've done it wrong. Like, then there's still something for you to know or learn about that. And maybe sometimes there are ways that, maybe sometimes it's true that it's almost impossible. But for me, it was incredibly important to my parents, to my friends, and to me, that we be able to maintain relationships even if we're making different choices about how to live our lives. And so I tried to really show that in the story, both how hard it is sometimes when someone you love is maybe turning out differently than you would expect, but how the love itself can keep that bond even through, you know, changes and differences, if the love is strong and important enough to us.
I think that love is such a great topic, and it's something I think that has to be entwined within the book, because it, you know, ultimately, when you consider a prophetess, love has got to be her middle name. Essentially, you know, she's got to be a person that's full of love, because, you know, otherwise she wouldn't be privy to this special place in the world. You know, I guess for me, that's how I perceive it. You know, one of the questions I love to ask toward the end of every interview is about gratitude. And I have found that I don't know if it's just a coincidence, but it seems like the authors that have had the most success seem to show the most gratitude in life. And I don't know if this is a part of your daily habit or practice, but is gratitude something that is part of your life on a regular basis?
It is. Yeah. So, I mean, I was like, just on a personal level, I have, I don't really do a gratitude journal, but I do a list on, not every night, but most nights, a list of things that I'm especially grateful for on that day. I also, in that practice, like, write something that I learned that day, and something that I'm proud of, and something I want to do better at. So yes, and I mean, I think you're right. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I think that not only can you be more successful when you're practicing gratitude and being grateful for things, but I think also you can be happier with what you have. So it's, you know, it's both ways. Like, if you have good things, then you can be grateful for them. But even if, you know, things aren't always working the way that you want them to, you can still be grateful for what you do have, and then that makes you feel fulfilled. So it's kind of a circle. And I'll just say that, I mean, Jewish tradition is full of the importance of gratitude. We have a Jewish concept for that, hakar satov, like this idea of being, regularly recognizing appreciation for the blessings we've been given and for the people in our lives. And actually, fun fact that so Jews are named after the one of Jacob's sons, Judah, and in Hebrew his name actually is the root for gratitude. So so in some ways like through a series of sort of language derivations, like to be a Jew means to be grateful or to be thankful.
Wow, that's really good. That's good. Nice to know.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. Yeah. You know, I grew up in a predominantly Jewish neighborhood in Denver, West Colfax area, and it was really, as I look back on my youth, it was really sad that I didn't have more curiosity and you know, just have more guts to reach out and talk to, you know, to the young kids that were, you know, Jewish kids in my neighborhood, because I felt like I actually, after looking back in my, you know, as an adult, looking back, I felt like I really robbed myself of such, you know, great opportunities to meet new people and people who have different faiths and different belief systems that are complementary to my own, you know. And so I think that writing this book and having this available now is really, really a great time for a great topic. And by the way, if someone wants to get a hold of you or get your book in hand, how can they reach you, Vaughn?
Yeah, so I think the simplest way is probably through my website. My website is yvonnemarzouk.com. And it's, so I don't know if you'll be able to share that anywhere, but that's, so on there, there's a form where people can send me messages, and I'm really excited to see them and respond. And there's a link there to the place where you can buy the book. So it's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. It's available in a few other places too. If you're you know want to buy it from a small store, you could probably do that too. So, and like I said, I mean, if it's not in your library, request it, because it would be great if they would get it. But it's available on Amazon specifically. It's available in hardcover and in Kindle version. And there's also an Audible version there.
And,
so yeah, so go ahead and check it out, and I'll just say that I really love doing events and programs for communities. I love doing book clubs. I'm really happy to be in a kind of book club conversation. Like if a book club reads the book, I'd be happy to be an author to answer questions and explore that. And I'm available for different kinds of classes and programs. So if this sounds like the kind of thing that would be exciting for your community, I'd love to talk about that too. So please be in touch. I'd be happy to talk to you.
Folks, you have got to get this book in your hand, The Prophetess, Yvonne Marzouk. I really feel, especially after talking to you, that this is a book that's an idea whose time has come. I think it's really a great topic. It's relevant. It's timely. And, you know, I think the world is, I always say, you know, the world's searching for a hero. The world's searching for someone to enlighten them, someone to open their eyes, to reveal something that, hey, it was there all the time, but you just didn't see it, you know? And I think that's what your book seems to do. It seems to have a, I don't know, I just, even holding the book, I get a sense that this book really reveals a lot more to, not just the Jewish faith, but life itself. I think it's got some good insight, good wisdom in there. So thank you so much for writing this book.
It was my pleasure, and thank you so much for having me.
Folks, you have been watching KUHS, the stream on Melody 5. This is the Weekend Boost. I'm Paul Lane. We have been talking to Yvonne Marzouk, author of the book. Guys, I'm telling you, get this book in your hand. Take a look at it. Get it, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Kindle, Audible. I mean, she's got it in so many formats. You've got to get this book in your hand. If you're a book club, guys, this is a great book. I think this would be a great read for group to read and discuss. And you know, I just challenge you to get this book in your hand. Again, thank you all for joining us. Yvonne, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for being on our show today.
Thank you.
All righty.